talk to you about John, who was also known as John the Beloved Disciple. He was one of the disciples of the Christ. But first, a bit of a sidebar. There is a big difference between Christ consciousness and Christianity. Long before Jesus walked this earth, before Christianity was formed, the Christ principle existed as a universal expression of divine intelligence. It was understood as the light that reveals truth, the living awareness that bridges the human and the divine, the inner connection that makes spiritual union between human and God possible. Have I lost you yet? Good.
No.
Christianity centers on the life of Jesus, with the role of the Christ as an external figure not clearly explained and definitely not clearly understood. After all, it is easier to understand a man-God who walked among us as opposed to the mystery of the cosmic Christ. The cosmic Christ is not a religion. This Christ spirit has been operative from the beginning of human existence, bringing wisdom and individuality. It aids us in awakening to our true spiritual essence through the universal forces of love, compassion, and divine wisdom. This recognition stands apart from the religious model of following an external authority, be it a book, no matter how divinely inspired, a church, a priest, a pastor, a bishop, a guru, etc. This is a direct connection to the divine. For with Christ consciousness, we do not need an intermediary to talk to God. I see Ray clapping back there. Yes, I accept. We do not need an intermediary to talk to God. We do not need an intermediary to walk with God, to hear God's voice. So how do I rationalize this Christ consciousness with the celebration of Lent and the Easter resurrection? And what in the heck does it have to do with the Apostle John, the topic that I set out to address today? Good questions. I'm so glad you asked. I was raised in a Protestant Christian family where the celebration and remembrance of Easter was at the core of our faith journey. After all, if there had been no resurrection, there would be no Christianity. So the Christian church molded many of my early understandings, mostly in a good way. I know that's an open-ended statement, but I'm not going there. Love of God, love of humanity, love of family, love of self, and of course, dedication to service. With the help of my mother and my church family, I was always learning and expanding my understanding of spiritual principles, not just religious ones. And yet the Easter celebration still is a core tenet in my spiritual life. Why? Because it reminds me that there is so much more that I do not understand. It reminds me that God will always have the last word. It reminds me that higher beings do exist to bring to humanity love, guidance, and divine wisdom. So today, the Sunday, just before the start of Lent, which is this Wednesday, I would like to talk to you about the Apostle John and his writings, because he wrote and taught from the perspective of Christ consciousness. He got it. Okay, now we get to John. The gospel that carries his name, the Gospel of John, is steeped in the mystical and begins thus. The Word was in the beginning. Now when he refers to the Word, it's a mystical reference, referencing the Christ. The Word was in the beginning, and that very Word was with God, and God was that Word. The same was in the beginning with God. Everything came to be by his hand, and without him not even one thing that was created came to be. The life was in him, and the life is the light of men. The same light shines in darkness, and the darkness does not overcome it. Mystical writings. Do I understand all of that? No. But it still resonates with me when I read the phrase, and the same light shines in the darkness, and the darkness does not overcome it. John was one of the 12 male disciples. He walked side by side with Christ Jesus, witnessing miracles, facing persecutions and exile. His teachings are deeply rooted in his understanding of the mysteries of the Christ and the significance that it holds for all of humanity. John was born into a humble and hard-working family of fishermen on the Sea of Galilee. His father Zebedee was well known and respected. His mother Salome was a woman of faith. And like all good sons, John and his brother James, who also became a disciple, worked with their father as fishermen. It was a job that required strength and courage. But God had a different plan for John, which started to unfold on an ordinary day when Jesus Christ showed up at the Sea of Galilee. John and his brother James were on their father's boat, mending their nets. When Jesus approached and called to them, he said, "Follow me, and I will make you fishers of men." They immediately dropped their nets and followed. When Jesus saw these two brothers, he saw more than just lowly fishermen. He saw men who were ready to be chosen for something greater. This calling changed their lives forever. From that moment, from that second. They did not stop to think about it. They did not ask for time to prepare to leave their family. They immediately dropped everything they were doing and followed, leaving everything that they had known behind. In the Gospel of Matthew, it talks about Jesus Christ's ministry with his disciples. It says, Jesus traveled throughout Galilee, teaching in their synagogues and preaching the good news of the kingdom and healing every kind of disease and sickness among the people. And his fame was heard throughout Syria, so they brought to him all who were badly afflicted with different diseases, and those who were tormented with pains, and the insane, and epileptics, and cripples, and he healed them, and great crowds followed him. Within the larger group of the disciples, there was an inner circle, which in part consisted of John, his brother James, and Simon Peter. This was the inner circle who received the additional teachings, deeper knowledge that was not written down in the standard way. And they were present at some of the most important moments of this ministry, including the raising of Jairus' daughter from the dead, the transfiguration, and the agony in the Garden of Gethsemane. For 3 years, Christ Jesus taught and healed, and then he was arrested. Prior to his arrest, he gathered his disciples to share a last meal and announce that his hour was coming. From that supper in the upper room, Christ Jesus walked to the Garden of Gethsemane at the foot of the Mount of Olives in East Jerusalem. And it was here, while in prayer, that he was betrayed by Judas Iscariot. He was arrested, tried, tortured, and finally nailed to a cross, a most horrible and painful way to die. All of the disciples, except John, fled in fear. John, together with Mother Mary and Mary Magdalene, waited at the foot of the cross. With courage and fortitude, John and the women waited that long, dark day. And it is recorded that from the cross, when Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved, he said to his mother, "Woman, behold your son." Then he said to the disciple, "Behold your mother." And from that very hour, the disciple took her with him. In almost his last breath, Jesus entrusted John with the care of his beloved mother. And from that moment, John took Mother Mary as his own. For 3 bleak days after the crucifixion, the disciples lived in kind of a limbo, not knowing what to believe, not knowing what to do next, and fear for their own life. But on the morning of the 3rd day, Mary Magdalene was the first at the empty tomb, the first to recognize the transfigured Jesus and accept the truth of the resurrection. John was not too far behind her. Well, she had to tell him first, and then he went. Okay. So he shows up at the tomb, and he entered the tomb, and he sees the linen cloths lying there, and the burial napkin, which had been bound around the head, wrapped up and put in a place by itself. And at that moment, John, like Mary, recognized the truth of the resurrection and the living Christ. With his own eyes, John witnessed the miracles, the healings, the crucifixion. He saw the body taken down from the cross, removed to the tomb, and the tomb sealed with a very large stone. And yet 3 days later, he saw the stone which had been rolled away. He saw the empty tomb. He saw the burial cloths. And he believed in the resurrection. In addition to John's gospel account of the ministry of Christ Jesus, which is a beautiful account, he also wrote 3 letters which appear in the Bible's New Testament. Short letters, easy to read. In these letters, he emphasizes love and fellowship with God. And you get a glimpse of the mystical when he talks about the nature of God as love and light. Love and light is the nature of God. There is another thing that sets John apart. He was the only, he was the only disciple to die of old age. All the others were martyred, the most cruelly murdered. And yet it was in his old age, when he was exiled to the island of Patmos, that he received his visions. Divine visions and revelations leading to the writing of the book of Revelation. This is one of the most complex and misunderstood texts of the Bible, as it is filled with vivid imagery, symbolic language, and prophetic visions. I've tried to read Revelation. I have read Revelation. I do not understand it, and that's okay. John's writings are important because they give a unique perspective of the ministry of Christ Jesus and emphasize the themes of faith, love, truth, and the divinity of the Christ. John was a direct witness of all that transpired during the ministry, crucifixion, and resurrection of Christ Jesus. He did not speak of stories he had heard from others, only things he himself had been taught, had lived, had seen. All of these moments formed a foundation that strengthened his faith and his teachings. He wrote in his first letter, quote, "He who was from the beginning, the one whom we have heard and have seen with our eyes, have looked upon and have touched with our hands, we declare to you is the word of life." The word of life. The Word, the Christ. He was given the mission to transmit to the world what he had heard, what he had learned, what he had seen, what he had lived. He was not preaching a religion. He was not writing as a leader of a church. He was writing and talking of Christ consciousness and the legacy of hope and love and revelation. So why was John referred to as the disciple who Jesus loved? I don't know. I thought by really digging into this, I could figure it out. I didn't. But I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that of all the disciples, John was the one who got it, who understood the deeper teachings. And do you remember when I mentioned some while back that some of the most interesting things in the Bible are those things that are left unsaid? The why is obviously purposefully left out of the narrative, which leads me to suspect that the deeper teachings that were shared with John were so important that they could not be contained in the standard written word. They could not be made available to the masses. These teachings were hidden, mystical teachings of the cosmic Christ. Unity puts out every year an Advent devotional and a Lenten devotional. And this is our Lenten devotional this year. They are in the back. And this Unity Lenten devotional this year beautifully straddles the two principles of Christianity and Christ consciousness. It focuses on letting go of limiting thoughts, grudges, habits, to make space for spiritual renewal. This little devotional book offers us daily reflections to inspire mindfulness, compassion, exercising for releasing emotional and mental burdens, and affirmations and prayers to help reframe our mindset during the Lenten season. So I hope you will pick up a copy of the book and read the passage. Read a passage each day. Bring that to your Lenten practice. Some treat Lent as a time of sacrifice, which is an important part of some people's practice. But as our booklet so beautifully illustrates, it is also an opportunity to reimagine our life with greater peace, purpose, and joy. The Gospel of John is often recommended as a starting point for those unfamiliar with the Bible because it presents the message of love and hope in clear and a personal manner, making them more accessible. But the Gospel of John and his other writings also contain some of the most mysterious understandings of the Christ. John was present for the deeper teachings, given only to a few. And he endeavored to pass along those mystical teachings, and they shine through. This is the last sentence of his gospel, where he says, There are also a great many other things which Jesus did, which, if they were written one by one, not even this world, I believe, could contain the books that would be written. Welcome to the season of Lent. Namaste.
Namaste.